During the latest round of economic and trade consultations held in Geneva, Switzerland, China and the United States once again clashed over tariff barriers. With Donald Trump pulling the strings remotely, the US proposed an 80% tariff rate on Chinese goods. But will the US actually agree to this, considering China's Ministry of Commerce has already laid down its stance? In the 2 days leading up to the negotiations, the US engaged in intense diplomatic activities, reaching a tariff reciprocity agreement with the UK and initiating dialogue on tariff adjustments with India. The US aimed to form a coalition of pressure, intending to apply psychological intimidation to its primary adversary, China. In its trade negotiations with other countries, the US has been consistently reducing tariffs. For instance, the average US tariff on British goods dropped from 12% to 8%, securing access to London's $4.70 billion worth agricultural product market. Meanwhile, the tariff gap with India has been narrowed from 13% to 4%, covering 90% of India's trade categories. These tactical concessions to other nations are part of the US strategy to build a united front and exert multilateral pressure on China. At the negotiation table in Geneva, the US proposed a compromise plan to reduce the previous 145% tariff on Chinese goods to 80%. A 65 percentage point cut might seem substantial, but in reality, Trump's true acceptable tariff level is far lower. As analyzed before, based on US media reports, the progress of US trade negotiations with other countries, and Trump's campaign statements last year, his psychological price for tariffs on Chinese goods is around 50% to 60%. A day before Trump issued two key directives, a report in the New York Post confirmed this speculation. Citing sources, the report stated that the US government planned to significantly slash tariffs on Chinese goods, reducing the rate from 145% to the 50% to 54% range, with the earliest potential implementation as soon as the following week. Bloomberg's sources provided a similar figure, indicating a rate below 60%, specifically around 54%. How did this number come about? It's straightforward. Some may recall that Trump imposed 10% tariff hikes on Chinese goods in February and March this year. Adding these to the initial 34% retaliatory tariff, 10% plus 10% plus 34% equals 54%, presumably Trump's threshold for backing down. On the 21st of last month, Trump met at the White House with representatives from major US retail chains, including Walmart, Target, Costco, and Lowe's, to discuss tariffs on Chinese goods. After this meeting, rumors spread in the US business community that a 54% tariff on Chinese goods was under consideration, becoming an important reference for many retailers when formulating procurement quotes from China. The head of a toy company revealed that they were asking suppliers for quotes based on different tariff levels ranging from 10% to 54%, preparing in advance for potential tariff policy changes. Looking back at Trump's proposal to reduce tariffs to 80% ahead of the China-US negotiations, it's quite revealing. While an 80% tariff rate might seem like a significant concession by the US, behind this number lie a series of unreasonable demands. The US has asked China to fully open market access in 14 key sectors, strengthen 5 areas of cross-border regulatory cooperation, and lift export controls on 8 categories of strategic resources, including the highly coveted rare earths. Rare earths are crucial for the supply chain security of core industries such as semiconductors, new energy, and aerospace. Currently, China controls 80% of the global rare earth refining capacity and holds over 95% of the market share for certain rare earth varieties. Without China's rare earth supply, the US's core military-industrial complex would grind to a halt. In the face of these unreasonable demands, China remained unflustered. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce was straightforward, emphasizing that the talks were initiated at the US's request and urging the US to correct its wrongdoings. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded with even deeper implications, using the phrases steadfast as a mountain amidst wind and rain to describe its confidence in handling economic and trade frictions, and unwavering despite countless trials to demonstrate its determination to safeguard core interests. Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Hua Chunying directly stated that China is fully confident in its ability to handle US trade issues and can overcome the difficulties of the trade war. It's clear that China's agreement to the talks is not a concession. For the negotiations to yield results, the US must abolish its tariffs on Chinese goods, not just reduce them to 80%. The US needs to understand that Chinese goods do not rely solely on the US market. With diversified export channels and a vast domestic market, China is well equipped to counter the US's tariff coercion. If the US misjudges this, the talks will be a waste of time. China can make such resilient, assertive, and confident statements because it has a comprehensive industrial system as a backbone. China's manufacturing industry has topped the global rankings for 13 consecutive years, and its export dependence on the US has decreased from 19% in 2018 to 12% currently. The China-US game is not a contest about implementing existing rules, but a struggle for the right to formulate new ones. The US aims to reshape the global industrial chain through tariff policies. Its outsourcing strategy has already led to $340 billion in production capacity shifting to Southeast Asia. However, China, relying on its dual circulation development paradigm, has not only maintained a 17.5% share of global exports, but also established new advantages in emerging fields such as digital trade and the green economy. In 2023, China's cross-border e-commerce import and export volume exceeded 2.3 trillion yuan, and its photovoltaic module exports accounted for 80% of the global total. These new growth drivers serve as crucial bargaining chips at the negotiation table. Rare earths represent a powerful ace in China's hand. Since 2022, China's export control list has precisely targeted 7 heavy rare earth elements, including chromium and titanium. These materials are essential for precision, guided weapons, and permanent magnet motors. The tight supply of these heavy rare earths has already caused production line delays for the US F-35 fighter jets. Recently, the US military-industrial complex has lobbied Congress to allocate $5.8 billion for strategic reserves, indirectly underscoring the urgency of this resource-based standoff. During the Geneva negotiations, China maintained its long-standing approach, ready to confront if necessary, willing to talk when conditions are right, but never making the slightest concession. If the US persists in making excessive demands, it risks repeating the spiral of escalation seen during Trump's first term in 2018. Currently, reducing the tariff rate above 54% might seem relatively less challenging. This portion of the tariffs was largely imposed after April 2nd, mainly as a show of force in response to China's countermeasures. The real challenge lies in bringing the remaining 54% down to zero. This 54% includes 10% hikes in February and March, along with a 10% baseline tariff applied to all countries. To clarify, Trump's reciprocal tariffs consist of 2 parts: a 10% baseline tariff applicable to all US trading partners, except a few sanctioned nations like Russia and North Korea, and additional tariffs targeting specific countries or regions. For example, the 24% tariff on Japan combines the 10% baseline with a 14% surcharge. These additional tariffs were Trump's bargaining chips in negotiations. In talks with Japan, he only agreed to cut the 14% extra tariff, and the 10% baseline remained intact in the US-UK agreement. When it comes to negotiating China-US tariffs, past experiences with the UK and Japan cannot be blindly applied. For Trump, China presents a fundamentally different challenge. Thus, reducing the combined 20% from February and March, the 10% baseline, or the 24% extra tariff will be extremely difficult. Each component will likely require extensive back and forth negotiations, with every detail crucial to the final agreement. And at present, the negotiations on these core issues remain a long way off. Finally, the sudden resumption of China-US negotiations evokes memories of Trump's first term, when the US unilaterally imposed tariffs. China responded tit for tat, and the two sides engaged in multiple rounds of trade talks. The tariff hikes and negotiations spanned 4 phases. One of the most memorable encounters occurred on March 18, 2021, during the China-US high-level strategic dialogue in Anchorage, Alaska. Yang Jiechi, then director of the Office of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with then U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and then National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Yang Jiechi forcefully rebuked the U.S., stating, "We thought too well of you. We believed you would respect basic diplomatic etiquette, which is why we had to clarify our position just now. Let me be clear, you have no right to speak to China from a position of strength. You didn't have that standing 20 or 30 years ago, and you still don't today, because the Chinese people will not tolerate such arrogance. History will prove that attempts to suppress China by blocking key resources will ultimately backfire. China has learned from past experiences and will not idealize the US as it once did. For years ago, China refused to yield to US pressure, and today, capitulation is even more out of the question." That's all for today's program. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support makes a world of difference. See you next time.